what we're seeing on the streets of the British cities raises this question of, if the public keep saying something to the politicians and the politicians keep not just ignoring them, but insulting them, what are they allowed to do, these people? These are populations that have every single election, like the rest of the British people, for 20 years, they have voted for less immigration and been told that they'd get it. And instead, it's just gone up. They've lived through an economy since 2008, where of the jobs created by the British government since 2008, so in the last, we're talking 16 years, of the jobs created since 2008, 74% have gone to people who were not born in Britain.
What happens when the public keeps raising concerns, but politicians not only ignore them, but insult them? In a recent interview with Jordan Peterson, Douglas Murray explains the deep frustrations building in British and European cities. He discusses the implications of this trend.
The government refuses to do what the public keep on asking for and what the government keeps on saying it'll do. It is seen to be, I think accurately, extremely lax on policing certain social cohesion issues. It's extremely eager to crack down on anyone of a Tommy Robinson type. What material benefits have come about in the society in the last 16 years have largely gone to people who were not born in the country. What is permissible in this situation to do? And I would say peaceful protesting would be one thing, or speaking up, except that every time even there is a peaceful protest, the peaceful protesters are defamed as far right. But somehow the actual desire to tar anyone who has not got a voice and is wanting to make their voice heard as a violent far right seems to me to be a big error by Keir Starmer and others. If you can't say, we recognize your deep, deep concerns, well, we understand your deep, deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this, but there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors or anyone else. If they can't say that, they just cannot say it. They just have to go to the secondary thing. What kills me about this is it's exactly what I've said for years. If you don't deal with a primary problem, you get secondary problems. And if you just focus on the secondary problem, you will you'll not only not solve the primary problem, you will make it worse. Exactly what we're seeing.
You know, you say the politicians campaign, at least on the conservative side, at least some of the time, with the claim that they're going to get a handle on this, but they don't. In fact, quite the opposite. They seem to facilitate it. Is that because it's actually beyond their control? Or is it because, here's a psychological reason. It's like, for decades, our culture has insisted on something approximating a position of moral relativism. There's no way of drawing hierarchical distinctions between the value claims that different cultures present. We can't admit for a moment that there might be some reason to be leery, let's say, of an immigrant class that would be associated with the kind of education that the madrasas are producing for all sorts of ideological reasons. We can't make any allowance for the idea that some immigrants might be more difficult to integrate into our culture than others. And that is a thorny problem. My sense is the working class doesn't get to have their say, because if they had their say, everyone who's modern and liberal and tolerant in that pathological manner that accepts everything without distinction would have to do some serious digging into the understructure of their own belief system.
One is something that isn't inevitable, but is hard to resist, which is the simple ease of movement in the 21st century, the relative cheapness of travel compared to any previous century, and the knowledge through the devices we have in our pockets around the globe. I mean, 3 billion people are on WhatsApp alone. The ability of people anywhere in the world to discover the life of anyone else in the world easily. Add to that the fact that most countries in the world are not even remotely approximating either the safety or the wealth available in 21st century Canada, for instance, or Britain. it's inevitable that a lot of people will want that. Just because they may want it does not mean that Western liberal democracies can remotely be the place where everybody who wants a better life can or should go. It's simply impossible. And you just crunch the numbers on people in sub-Saharan Africa who want to move into Europe, for instance. And if that happened, if the third of sub-Saharan Africa who want to moved, Europe would totally unrecognizable. The second thing that comes from that is that it is extremely difficult for politicians to maintain their borders. And I think this is highly regrettable, because I think the only way in which, among other things, you can have an actual asylum system where you actually take in those unusual cases where asylum should be needed, just disappear once you have illegal migration every day coming in on boats, or as in the case of America, millions of people walking across the southern border in the last 4 years. And add to that the fact that, as was famously said in 1968 by somebody, it's the easiest thing to put off any difficult decision you have to make today and leave it for your successors to address, all the time making it harder for your successors. But I said this to a European politician some years ago when they said that they were going to deport the 1 million illegals that were in their country. I said, how are you going to do it? Because you and I know that on day one, if you rounded up everyone who is legally in the country and put them on buses, trains, boats, the first woman or child crying would be on the front page of every newspaper the next morning. And by day 2, you would have to stop because of public pressure. That's just, it seems to be a reality for the time being. By the way, until such a time emerges, and it could, where the society says we don't give a damn anymore, we don't give a damn, that may well happen. But until that does happen, countries are absolutely incapable, politicians are incapable of answering this question. Then you have a follow-on one, which addresses what you mentioned about Richard Dawkins, among other things, which is America. It's not quite true to say that America was a society based on an idea, but it's a nice idea. America was based on an idea, but the idea came about because of the people who founded the Republic, the United States of America. If they had have been from somewhere else, even a different denomination, the United States would be very different. However, as far as states founded on an idea goes, America is probably the nearest to that. European nations, Britain, are not based on an idea. They were not based on an idea. Now, that isn't to say that they don't have very distinct cultures. And my word, the different cultures across Europe are so different that everyone jokes about their neighbors and regards their neighbor in the neighboring European country being wildly different from them. To an outsider, it seems preposterous that the Swedes and the Norwegians would have distinctions between them, but they do. Europe and Britain was made up of ethnic identities. And those ethnic identities had ideas, of course. But even in Britain, you have the Welsh, you have the Scots, you have the English, Northern Irish, the Irish. How do you integrate into that? How do you do it? Does anyone know? And the answer is no. Have some people? I'd say yes. Have a majority? It doesn't look that way to me. It has been about ethnicity. We don't like things about being about ethnicity. So we say it's about an idea. But all my adult life, this idea has been so hard for anyone to pin down that they've just failed at it time and time again.